realize what our nation is all about. So first, let's look at the breadth that he talks about. He says the changes wrought by the Cultural Revolution encompass the full sweep of American life. The new meanings that have evolved discard many of the traditional roles of personal conduct. The new meanings simply turn the old ones on their head, and in place of the self-denial ethic that once ruled American life, we now find people who refuse to deny themselves anything. And he goes on to give an illustration from geology, how the plate tectonics shift below the Earth's surface to create the gyrations and the shifting, and he said there's a shifting in cultural values going on. And his last line there in the breadth is, the experiments are risky, acting in the name of self-fulfillment. Many people are startled to wake up one day and find themselves with a broken marriage, a wrong-headed career change, or simply a muddled state of mind about what life's choices are all about. You see how well he has encapsulated it. I've just taken thumbnail sketches of what he said. He said the shifting is very dramatic, and all of a sudden some of our families are waking up some morning either with a broken home, some broken dreams, some intense personal conflicts, and at an all-time high, we are finding our counselors extremely busy because the breadth of the impact of our cultural revolution has been so enormous. Then he goes to explain what he means by the self-fulfillment contradiction. At the core of the Cultural Revolution is a phenomenon I call the self-fulfillment contradiction, the mismatch between the goals of Americans seeking self-fulfillment and the means they deploy to achieve those goals. The search for full self-fulfillment is a voyage of personal discovery, spurred on by the belief that we must shift the priorities of self and society away from the impersonal and manipulative aspects of life. Thus, seekers of self-fulfillment invest in the best of their creativity in inventing expressive styles of living. For at the heart of the self-fulfillment search is the moral intuition that the very meaning of life resides in its sacred, expressive aspects, and that one must fight, if necessary, to make room for them. People unwittingly bring a set of flawed psychological premises to the search for self-fulfillment. In particular, the premise that the human self is a hierarchy of inner needs and self-fulfillment an inner journey to discover them. That line alone ought to give the New Age person pause. Because the New Ager has set up this hierarchical system, intricately planned, and he says it brings some flawed psychological assumptions to all of it. Sensing this contradiction between their goals and strategies and being aware of the change for the worse in economic conditions, what they most fear today is that they will end up empty-handed. That's the self-fulfillment contradiction he talks about. First breadth, then the self-fulfillment, then he talks here about the conflict and confusion, and I think it's marvelous what he concludes as he proceeds here. He says this now: the search for self-fulfillment and the contradiction within it create intense social conflict and confusion. I won't read the next paragraph, but basically he says, in a matter of a few years, we have moved from an uptight culture set in a dynamic economy to a dynamic culture set in an uptight economy. A society preoccupied with introspection and self-fulfillment is easily caught off guard by an unanticipated shift in economic relationships, an era in which people are eager to enjoy the benefits of 30 years of unparalleled economic growth is a terrible time psychologically to face disagreeable economic truths. And I'll sum it all up with this startling conclusion that he makes here. The stakes are high. Listen to what he says now. Each new choice involves a surrender and sometimes an abandonment of what was valued. You can't have everything, but I'm not sure what to give up. He now talks to a couple and he interviews them, and listen to what he says. You can't have everything, says one of them, but I'm not sure what to give up and what to hang on to. Sometimes I feel like all the doors in the world are open to me, and yet at other times I feel as if they're all closing. If you feel it is imperative, says Abby here as he's talking to them, to fill all your needs, and if these needs are contradictory or in conflict with those of others or simply unfillable, then frustration inevitably follows. To Abby, to Mark as well, self-fulfillment means, listen now, having a career and marriage and children and sexual freedom and autonomy and being liberal, and having money, and choosing nonconformity, and insisting on social justice, and enjoying city life, and country living, and simplicity, and graciousness, and reading, and good friends, and on and on and on. The individual is not truly fulfilled by becoming ever more autonomous. Indeed, to move too far in this direction is to risk psychosis, the ultimate form of autonomy. Listen to the closing line of his article. The injunction that to find oneself, one must lose oneself contains a truth any seeker of self-fulfillment needs to grasp. If he'd only read Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, he could have saved himself all this research. But you see how it's moving? We move philosophically, dealing with the law of non-contradiction, struggling with it. We move sociologically here and come to the conclusion that our problem is we want everything. You cannot have free love and a secure marriage. Love is intended to be exclusive and sacred. You cannot give children all the liberties and expect them to come out without any moral boundaries at all. You cannot just keep punctuating it with and. And that's really what has happened in the last 10 years, and we find so many people coming up completely empty-handed. So what I say to you is, philosophically, we ended up with the problem of reason. And what result did that have on the church? The church ended up with a sense of intimidation. The church did not know how to deal with the philosophical struggles of secular man. In the sociological situation, there has come a contradiction because of all of the additional number of things people want, and the church has ended up in isolation. Intimidation philosophically, isolation sociologically. So that it is almost like, if you want to find out what a church is, it is like a ghettoish mentality tucked away someplace, and the average person doesn't really know what church life is all about unless they truly get into the mainstream. It seems such a far cry for them. I have been a seminary professor and have spent 7 years in theological education. And I want you to know one of the biggest tragedies of formal theological education today is that most seminary students really don't know how to lead a person to Christ. Because in 4 years of graduate education, there has been a necessary hibernation that has taken place, and they are dealing with levels of theological thinkers 50, 60 years ago, and we sit down in a plane next to somebody, and the person has just had a broken home happen in their lives, or the son has committed suicide, or there's an intense personal struggle going on, and all of a sudden lifted out to the Barth, Bultmann, and Brunner type of thinking, which was needed for certain areas, all of a sudden thrown next to a person who's struggling with their personal problems. The seminarian is trying to dig up every avenue that he can, almost having to unlearn what he's learned in the classroom in order to communicate to the person next to him. So very serious. I have done some lectureships in seminaries in very, very recent times. I'll leave some of them unnamed. Invariably, the president will go out for dinner with me before it is all over and say, you know what I want to tell you? I want to tell you that something is very wrong in the very fiber of what has been going on for the last 10 to 20 years. How are we going to get our ministers in this decade to be able to communicate to people in our times? Because there has been an isolation taking place. The third area, from philosophical to sociological, the third area is what I would like to call the historical. And I think this is important because we need to see what it is that America is living by and what exactly happened over the centuries. America is experienced as a four-level structure. Now let me show this to you because I think it's very pivotal to see what happened. If you turn to the book of Genesis, in Genesis chapter 3, and see what happened there, Adam and Eve are living in Eden. And there is a sense of acceptance of the Edenic milieu. It is fine. There is beauty, there is love, there is religiosity, there is freedom to enjoy all that is legitimate and right. And Satan comes, of course, and in that conversation we all know what happened. But the end result was a desire to be your own authority in Eden without the restrictions of God. to create our own Eden apart from the presence of God. Well, as we go through the 15th through the 17th centuries, I think this is very, very interesting what really happened here. Just before the 15th and the 17th centuries, what took place was what is properly known as the Renaissance. In fact, if you go to any English university today, whether you're studying history, whether you're studying English literature, whether you're studying philosophy, whether you're studying almost any of the humanities, sooner or later within the first 3 to 4 lectures, the word Renaissance will come in. The whole idea of the Renaissance, where man's creative spirit was discovered, and some great works of art and all that emerged. I think it's important to notice, on the heels of all of that, between the 15th to the 17th century, came the explorers and a pilgrim to this continent, looking for the new Eden, as it were. The whole move was being set, looking for a new Eden.
You've been listening to a classic message from Ravi Zacharias titled Understanding the Spirit of the Age. If you would like to purchase a complete copy of this message, call us at 1-800-448-6766. If you prefer to order online, you can visit us at rzim.org or rzim.ca for those listening in Canada. Stay tuned. Ravi will be right back with Just a Thought. We hope these radio programs help encourage and equip you. And if you'd like to learn more, you might check out RZIM Academy. It is an online training curriculum designed to help you become better equipped to answer questions from your friends and colleagues. This curriculum is filled with content from Ravi and other RZIM speakers who share their expertise in the form of recorded lectures. To learn more, go to rzimacademy.org.
This is Just a Thought with Ravi Zacharias.
Just a few months ago, I was in the city of Madras in India. It is in a tiny little home, in a tiny little street where a car could barely get through, with those stinking gutters on either side of the road. I went there, stood in front of this home, and as I stood there, 4 or 5 little boys with tattered clothes were standing there, barefoot, and in their native tongue I said to them, I now live in Atlanta in America. And then they said, why are you here? I said, I was born in that house. They were absolutely stunned. I was like one of those boys growing up. I said, today God's given me the privilege of standing before audiences all over the world to tell them of the love of Christ. What a trust God has given. Ladies and gentlemen, what has He given you?
Helping the thinker believe and the believer think. For more information, go to rzim.org.
Here at RZIM, we strive to help the thinker believe and the believer think. If you would like to partner with us, either in prayer or financial support, please contact us at 1-800-448-6766. If you'd like to donate, you can go to rzim.org and click on the Donate tab. If you're listening in Canada, that website is rzim.ca. Let My People Think is a listener-supported radio ministry and is furnished by Ravi Zacharias International Ministries, Atlanta, Georgia.
Breakthrough Media.